Today we are breaking down the Chargers' biggest defensive training camp battles, and even after a 3-interception playoff performance, Asante Samuel Jr. could be fighting for a starting spot.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 7 seasons, but this is our 5th season as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen today, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen to the show wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Today we get into our defensive camp battles. So that means Asante Samuel Jr. versus Jaseer Taylor, JT Woods taking on Alohi Gilman, and Daiyan Henley versus K9 Kenneth Murray.
A lot more starting spots up for grabs on the defensive side, even though a lot of these guys, they think, will have a pretty legitimate head start going in, right? Not all of them are created equal. And the first one we're talking about is a little surprising, but this episode of Locked On Chargers is brought to you by eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. So I'm glad we did this show today, David, because Daniel Popper from The Athletic, one of the people I think we trust most when it comes to Chargers news and Chargers kind of reports, was talking about the biggest storylines going into training camp. And one thing he said that was a little bit surprising was that Jaseer Taylor would be going into camp as the starter in the slot, which, if J.C. Jackson is back healthy, would put Asante Samuel Jr. out of a job. So with J.C. Jackson saying, hey, I will be back for training camp, I will be back to start the season, this puts us in a position we weren't sure, we were going to be in, at least as far as how heated this competition could be. It's something we brought back up when we talked about who will be CB1. It's like, okay, well, if J.C. Jackson's back, does Asante Samuel Jr. just automatically get the start in the slot? And according to Daniel Popper, David, it's going to be Jaseer Taylor's job to lose in training camp.
Which honestly is very surprising to me. Like, I was not expecting to read that and feel like, okay, wow, like this is much more of a battle than I had ever anticipated. I mean, just consider Jaseer Taylor had 161 snaps on defense, and he only really contributed in a handful of games. And yeah, he started against the Miami Dolphins, and he played a pretty good football game in that one. And I think that's the one, according to Daniel Popper, that really gave the Chargers coaching staff the confidence to be able to put him in this spot. But I don't know, for me, Daniel, if I've seen enough to just outright just hand him that job and have him be the guy that says, hey, this is mine, until someone takes it away from me. I just don't know if that's the best alignment or best use of your defensive weapons.
Well, the thing about Asante Samuel Jr. is if you saw him, you'd think he was a slot corner anyways, right? He's a little bit smaller. I mean, his game, at least as far as like lateral quickness and, keeping up with kind of quicker slot receivers, is something it seems like he would do very well at, right?
Yeah.
A lot of different responsibilities come from the star position, the nickel position in Brandon Staley's defense, obviously. And the one thing that was a little surprising when looking it up, David, was just the fact that Asante Samuel Jr., with Bryce Callahan in the mix, obviously, only played 10 snaps in the slot last season. That is not something that I thought that number would have been a lot higher, right? So, they were not using him in the slot last year at all. Even when Bryce Callahan was out with injuries, they went with Jaseer Taylor at that spot. What I'm wondering, though, is like, okay, if J.C. Jackson misses, the first few weeks of training camp, and you're just putting Asante Samuel Jr. outside with the ones on defense, are you giving him a fair shot in the slot, right? But I think the other thing is, too, is maybe the mistake that we made is just kind of assuming, okay, well, you're going to find a way to get your best 3 corners on the field. So it's just very hard to imagine, at least right now, seeing someone like Asante Samuel Jr. who is uneven, right? And I think maybe the lack of run defense, or the him not being in the right spots in run defense and him kind of being a poor run defender, even though he was a better tackler, maybe that is weighing heavier in their minds, right? Something along those lines. But to have a guy with 3 interceptions and a half and showing that kind of ability coming off the bench, David, just feels a little crazy for a Chargers defense who, doesn't have so many great players that they have a hard time getting them on the field normally.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is a situation where they're trying to mix and match, where they're trying to try to emphasize the strengths of a certain player and cover up, the deficiencies of another. Like we know, Jasir Taylor is a guy that they feel maybe a little bit more physical, a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more effective against the run. I mean, I think that's a way that they feel. But then you're taking away Asante Samuel Jr.'s just innate ball skills, his ability to really feel and see and act out there and make those big, crazy, game-changing type of plays. Because whenever you're taking the football away, you are changing the flow and the energy and the momentum of the football game. Those are big, big plays. And are you wanting to take that big play potential off the field? I don't know. That's a really, really hard question to answer.
Yeah, and it's not like he was bad last year, right? He allowed 6 touchdowns, but a passer rating 97.6. That's not very bad. I mean, 9 pass breakups last year, a couple of interceptions, including a ridiculous one against Devontae Adams, leaving his coverage and going to find the ball. When I think about Brandon Staley introducing his defense, right, one of the main things he talked about the star position, which has that name in his defense specifically, being the nickel spot, was, okay, sometimes we're going to put Derwin there, right? Sometimes we might put this guy or that guy. You want to put players there who you want to be around the football. And I mean, if you're talking about somebody you want to be around the football and kind of where the football is going to go, you would think that would be someone that had 3 interceptions and a half. So it's not like Asante Samuel Jr. has been perfect. The thing we've been preaching all offseason long is consistency, right? Can you even it out, or are you just going to be kind of a boom or bust player? Like, I don't think Daniel Popper is taking any shots at Asante, or his play with saying this. It's just that, hey, this is a guy who, when it wasn't Bryce Callahan last year, it was Jasir Taylor. So he was the starter in the slot. But last year, you also didn't have J.C. Jackson in the mix towards the end of the season. So we don't know what that would look like when they're all out there. All we've seen so far this year, OTAs, Jasir Taylor is out there in the slot. I think Asante Samuel Jr. from reports was coming in after him there, but was starting outside with the first team defense. So it's going to be very interesting. And like the thing is, I don't want to take away from Jasir Taylor. I mean, this is a dude I think gave up 9 touchdowns his final year in college, and honestly probably killed a lot of his draft stock, which was already kind of low just because he was in college for 6 seasons, right? Yeah. But it's not like he was bad. Like, I think he had a really, really good season for a rookie. It's just hard to be like, okay, after how well Bryce Callahan played that position last year, that you feel like you're in a really, really good spot or with an unquestioned guy that's going to be starting there in year 2.
That's what I was saying. I don't know if I've seen enough on defense from Jasir Taylor to just outright give him that position and feel comfortable like that he's going to be the guy that's going to be playing or manning that star position the majority of the time. I just don't know right now that that's the correct answer. I feel like this is definitely should be a very heated battle. I feel like they need to cross-train Asante Samuel Jr. in the slot just in case, because J.C. Jackson is coming back from a very serious injury, Daniel. We don't know when he is going to be back, so the Chargers need to make sure that they plan accordingly and they have contingencies. And we know like they like to cross-train guys and they like to move them around, and it's for reasons like this. I mean, you have to be ready and you have to be agile to go out there and put whatever kind of guys you have available to fill those spots. And so this is going to be a very interesting battle. I think this is one that should be raging all training camp long.
And just as the competitor that Asante Samuel Jr. is, it'll be interesting to see how he takes it, right? Because, I mean, if he has to go to a bench role, that's something he's not very familiar with, right?
No.
Last year, his training camp battle was him versus Michael Davis. Guess who won? He did, right? Like, he beat out Michael Davis, who could legitimately be the Chargers' best corner this year. I mean, it doesn't mean it was right. Michael Davis got out there and looked fantastic.
He sure did.
So, he definitely deserved to be out there. But, it'll just be very interesting if they're willing, especially for a team that, really kind of seems to give every chance possible to the guys they pick early on in the draft, right? So for him to be coming off the bench as kind of a default to J.C. Jackson coming back will be a very big storyline, because, I mean, it just feels like there's some missed opportunities if that dude who feels like, maybe kind of turned the corner a little bit in that playoff game is now coming off the bench in a defense that, has been one of the worst in the league over the last several years, right? So if that dude can't get on the field with that playmaking ability, even if, as Daniel Popper's saying, he showed the coaching staff in Week 14 against the Dolphins, he was ready to get the starting role going forward. I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see. But if it does turn into position camp battle, though, I'll be very interested to see how it plays out. And hopefully these two dudes can push each other and everyone's making each other better. But two of the biggest impact battles going on during this defensive training camp on that side of the ball. JT Woods, and if he can tackle right versus Alohi Gilman, and Kenneth Murray versus Daiyan Henley. I'll say this. If Kenneth Murray isn't improved from the version of him we saw last year, Daiyan Henley should absolutely get that job. So we're going to be getting into more battles coming up right after this. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes in life we're faced with tough choices and the path forward isn't always clear. And that's when it's so nice to be able to talk to someone else about it, especially an objective opinion, getting someone else's thoughts that doesn't have the same investments or the same ties that you have. And getting that kind of neutral opinion can help so much. And I think kind of just even help you get to the decision on your own. So whether you're dealing with decisions around career, relationships, or anything else, therapy helps you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate life so you can move forward with confidence and excitement. Trusting yourself to make decisions that align with your values is like anything. The more you practice it, the easier it gets. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. I love BetterHelp. The great part about it for me is just fits in my schedule. I mean, I have 3 jobs right now. David's running around every day too. You know, we have a lot going on. Being able to schedule it and not have to leave my house to do it is something that makes all the difference to me. And all you have to do is just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge if you don't have the right fit. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. So many more battles to get into, so little time, David, because we have training camp coming up on Wednesday, so make sure you come up to me and say hi at training camp. I will be out there for day one. Very, very excited about it. And make sure you're back with us, maybe live that night, maybe the next day on Thursday for the day one recap, getting into the biggest things that happen on day one at training camp. And make sure you're here tomorrow for the biggest storylines, the things that we're most excited about. And the one battle we're not going to get to today, David, the kicker battle, getting to see Kellen Moore's offense, getting to see a Justin Herbert that's healthy. So many things we're excited about.
Oh, yes.
Very excited to see how these defensive camp battles turn out or how they kind of heat up during training camp. And I think mostly you just want to see everyone healthy, right? You want to see the best player being able to get the job if they deserve it. And I think it's hard to know which one of these next 2 battles we're going to talk about is more likely to have the backup or the new guy coming in and starting over the other one. I want to start with JT Woods and Alohi Gilman because to me, David, this is a competition for where each guy is going to have a role kind of no matter what because of what the safety position looks like. But it does also feel like it would take a monumental improvement from JT Woods to catch up to what I think Alohi Gilman kind of gained with this coaching staff during his run last season.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, especially when you consider the way that the Chargers and the organization speak about Alohi Gilman. I mean, they use words like he's a stabilizer, like he's a guy that, you know, we believe in. He's calm. He can see. Like, they use a lot of those, you know, similar adjectives when, you know, talking about Alohi Gilman. And I think Alohi Gilman is he's a solid football player. I feel like the ceiling there is not very high. I don't think there's a lot of playmaking ability that you can get from Alohi Gilman. JT Woods, on the other hand, I feel like his skill set, his ability out there in the open field, the speed, the ball skills, it's really tantalizing. And you know that can turn into interceptions. You know that can turn into impact plays. But if he cannot correct the tackling, he's not going to be able to see the field and get as many opportunities. That's why this is such a compelling matchup, because you have a really steady football player versus a guy that has a ton of potential that's still young. So we're going to see who takes the most out of this opportunity that they have in front of them.
I think another important part of this conversation, too, is just the faith the Chargers have shown in both these guys to go in with these guys as safeties 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Going into training camp and being content with that, I think kind of shows a lot of faith from this coaching staff. And I think that, you know, there are a lot of tantalizing traits with JT Woods, but it's just so hard to imagine, you know, to kind of get some of those memories out of your head. I mean, Daniel Popper talked about this as well in his offseason storylines. He said, hey, you know, JT Woods came in a game against the Cardinals when Nazir Adler was hurt, played 10 snaps, gave up a touchdown after missing a tackle on DeAndre Hopkins, and only played 2 snaps the rest of the season. It was ugly. Yeah, it's hard to believe they pulled off some of the games they did. And I mean, that Gerald Everett touchdown there and 2-point conversion
was beautiful.
I mean, yeah, it was a great game to watch. And, you know, it was a little bit of that Brandon Staley swag we saw more in 2021 too. But getting back to JT Woods, I mean, we've talked about before, if we weren't talking about JT Woods today, one of the biggest storylines going into tomorrow is just, can JT Woods tackle? Because the thing is, he's going to have a role. Like, he's going to get on the field at some point. That's just how the rotation in the secondary works. Can he tackle? I think, it's hard for me to say this, but like, I saw some nice things. Like, I really did see some flashes. So even as far away as I see, him from being able to go and take a starting spot, there's definitely a lot there to work with. There's just one true kryptonite, like one thing that makes you almost unplayable, and you just have to kind of get over that hump. But I think, for Alohi Gilman, like, if Alohi Gilman's just fine, if Alohi Gilman's just average, David, like, the Chargers can still have a really, really good defense.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I think Alohi Gilman is a guy that you trust to go out there and do his job. I feel like he's a guy that's going to be competent. He's going to be able to, make sure that your defense is competitive. I don't know if he's going to make any, groundbreaking, crazy type of plays to change or alter the way that the game is going to end up.
I mean, he did get the game-winning interception against the Browns last year.
Hey, you're right. You're right. I'll give him that credit for sure. But I just feel like between these two guys, it's very clear. I mean, if JT Woods is able to tackle better, I think he's going to get more of those opportunities. I feel like he's a guy because prototypically, right? Prototypically, you want JT Woods out there with Derwin James. I mean, it's just their skill sets, they mesh very, very well together. If those are your back two safeties, but like you said, I think JT Woods is going to be on the field a lot anyway because they want to be able to move Derwin James around, and they have to feel comfortable about that. So you might be seeing Alohi Gilman and JT Woods out there on the back end while they move Derwin James around wherever they feel like the ball is going to be coming out at.
Yeah, and you're going into dime and have 6 defensive backs, right? He probably gets on the field in that way, just like Alohi Gilman did when it was Derwin James and Nazir Adderall on the field at the same time. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the safety group plays out too. Feels like Mark Webb, a guy getting back in the mix a little bit, hopefully healthy. Excited to see what the undrafted free agent A.J. Henley does. Yes. Excited to see what Raheem Lane can do, who kind of gets another chance in 2022 after making an impression in his first season. But I want to talk about Daiyan Henley versus Kenneth Murray, and I think the thing is here is just, will Daiyan Henley get a true shot, right? Because it's just, okay, if Drew Tranquill wasn't good enough to keep on your defense, right, at a pretty reasonable price, because you're right, at a super reasonable price, wasn't worth bringing back to put in this defense. If that's not good enough, it's just hard for me to imagine the Chargers would be good enough with what Kenneth Murray has been the last couple of years, which has been, the worst run defending linebacker in football, according to Pro Football Focus, but just from the eye test, just plain not good enough. Will they give Daiyan Henley a true chance to go and win this job during training camp?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest question, especially when you look at the Chargers and the way they've handled these type of training camp battles. I think they really do put a little bit more emphasis on where a player was drafted.
The Jerry Tillery theory, right?
Yeah, the Jerry Tillery situation, right? A guy where there was other guys that seemed like they were clearly better and should have been on the field a lot more, and Jerry Tillery was on the field, and so. You just hope that in this situation, they can come in here objectively, look at and see how Daiyan Henley performs in training camp, see how Kenneth Murray performs, and allow, regardless of status, the best football player to be on the field playing next to Eric Hendricks. Because at the end of the day, that's what you want. And the Chargers have already indicated that Kenneth Murray is not in their future plans. They did not pick up his 5th-year option. And I just think that the linebacker position is one that they always feel like they are going to just recycle in the draft. Every 4 years, they're going to be looking at grabbing another player. And right now, it's Daiyan Henley. So how quickly can Daiyan Henley earn that spot? I mean, we know that he's a part of the future plans, obviously, but how quickly can he be that number 1 linebacker next to Eric Hendricks?
I like to hope that they're going to give him a real shot at it. I do think that you've seen with plenty of first-round linebackers that the transition into the NFL level is not as easy as some other positions. It's really tough. Devin White, Devin Bush, Kenneth Murray, Patrick Queen. Like there's a ton of guys you could look at, right, where it's tough. I do like the fact that Daiyan Henley actually comes with more experience, stayed in college longer, played multiple different, types of ways in different defenses, and also played multiple different positions, right? Has receiver background, quarterback background, safety background, of course, because we're talking about a Tom Telesco drafted linebacker.
Of course,
But to me, it's just like, it's almost going to feel like, I mean, we'll see how it plays out, and we'll see how they actually look, right? And you can only see so much during training camp, but Daiyan Henley was a great tackler, good in coverage, a playmaker, had good instincts, could shed blocks and get around blocks, But he's also, it took other guys 4 years to have it click, or 3+ years in Kazir White's case. Drew Tranquil breaks out in year 4. Kenneth Murray, I don't know, man. Like, it's hard to imagine that he is going to be good enough, or isn't going to be a problem with what we've seen. And he has a long way to go. You just hope that Daiyan Henley can at least push him. And you just hope that if he does win this job, that Daiyan Henley at least gave him a good run for it. And he's just not keeping the job because nobody could go up and take it, right? Like, you just hope that if he is winning this job, it's because he has made the improvements in his game and we see an improved version of him that was good enough to keep Daiyan Henley off the field. But it does feel like some of those snaps might be up for grabs, especially certain packages like we talked about. Like, I hope they find a way to get Daiyan Henley on the field. I hope Daiyan Henley picks up the defense quick enough to make that an option, right? But we do have more positions to talk about, including the first edge rusher on the field after the top two guys, Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, because guess what? Whoever that third guy is going to play a lot if it ends up going anything like last season. We'll also talk about a very, very tight competition on the defensive line to see who is going to make this roster. And we're going to get into that coming up right after this. Tomorrow we will be getting into the biggest Chargers storylines going into training camp that every day, as I already know, will be here tomorrow. And I'll be seeing you guys at Chargers training camp on Wednesday, opening day, hopefully. But
not jealous, not at all.
Yeah, I know. David did make the trip, though. Give him credit all the way from Texas to go to a training camp practice that's only 2 hours last year. So he does what he can when he can. We also went to the scrimmage, too. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of things that David's been able to do. But I will be out there on Wednesday, very, very excited, and there's not many players I'm more excited to see once I get out there than Chargers second-round pick Tuli Tuipulotu. He's a guy that we liked a lot coming out. I mean, he was a guy when we first saw him as a first-round pick mocked to the Chargers by either Tom McShay or Mel Kiper Jr. I forget. I apologize to both of you gentlemen that listen, frequent listeners.
Of course.
But we're like, I like it. He has a fun style. Maybe not a first-round pick.
Yeah.
But, it someone where you can see why they would be interested in it, right? 13.5 sacks last year, led the Pac-12, one of the leading sack guys at the FBS level, right? And the Power 5 level for sure. But he's young, right? He's incredibly young. The thing is, though, is he's more than likely going up against Chris Rumpf as that next guy on the field after Joey Bosa or Khalil Mack when those guys need a spell. Who is the next guy coming up right now? It looks like it's Tuli versus Chris Rumpf, and I think I'm going Tuli at least right now, right?
Yeah, Tuli just makes you feel like he's probably a little bit better suited to handle the edge and be able to secure the edge. He's a guy that has some strong active hands. He's able to make those tackles against the run just a little bit more effectively, based off of his college performance. And when we watch Chris Rumpf, which we did, we watched Chris Rumpf before the Chargers even drafted him, and with him it was always, hey, he got real close to making a lot of plays, but he was very slender and he was a liability in run support. That's just, and unfortunately at this point in time he has not changed that narrative. That's still what is going on. He gets close to making plays and he's a liability in run support. So I think with Tuli, with the sack production and his ability that he's already showcased to be a little bit more of a run defender on the edge, it makes me feel like Tuli definitely should have the leg up and be that next edge rusher on the field. Yeah,
but the thing is, he's super young, right?
20 years old. You got to see it, right? Yeah, we got to see it for sure.
He came out of college early. My big thing, too, that I'm interested in is just kind of seeing what his physique is, right? How they plan to use him. Do they plan on using him on the interior?
Because he changed his body in college, right? He was kind of a different version of himself. So
yeah, he seemed like he fluctuated. I think I've seen between like 260 and kind of 290 pounds, right? So that's a huge kind of fluctuation. Big. They asked him to do different things there too, and he rushed quite a bit on the inside at USC. I think the thing is here is that him and Chris Rumpf both struggle with the same things. If I was taking one thing away from Tuli is just, hey, a little reckless at times, runs past the quarterback, missed sacks, right?
Yeah.
It'd be crazy to see how many sacks he would have had if he had all the sacks he had an opportunity for.
Probably 20.
He ended up on the ground a little bit too often. He's a young player and also, was a 20-year-old trying to put the entire USC defense on his back because they were terrible. But Chris Rumpf last year had 8 tackles, right, which is not going to blow anyone away. This number is a little bit mind-boggling. He had 9 missed tackles. He had more missed tackles last year than he had made tackles. That's
Yikes.
It's hard, man, especially for someone who's more slender and really, really struggled to keep containment. And that was just one of the things on the edge the Chargers struggled with the most last season, and why you saw so many perimeter runs break for huge gains. Had a lot to do with that. So Chris Rump hopefully has makes a leap in his 3rd season. Yeah. But Tuli, I think, coming in as a 2nd-round pick, I don't know, man. Like, this position is going to play a lot of snaps this year.
Right. You hope it doesn't, right? You hope it doesn't, but you understand. Yeah, you understand just the injury history of Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. You want both those guys on the field. You want them to play 17 games. Yeah. But let's wake up here, people. This is reality. We know that injuries are going to happen, especially to that position group. So one of these guys need to be ready to step up and be a good, competent edge player for the Chargers this season.
And it's a little bit questionable, right? This is a position group where the depth is an unproven player and a player that hasn't proven, when he has gotten on the field, that he belongs there. So I think it's really tough because that's one of the things that undid your defense last season. You just did not have a consistent enough pass rush when Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack both weren't out there.
Is Tuli enough, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I think he probably wins and gets more snaps on the edge than, Chris Rump does if they're both healthy, but they're going to need to be more than just winning that job, right? Or passing kind of where that bar is right now. So I do want to quickly touch on the defensive tackle spot. A lot of guys at the bottom of this fighting for a spot, and that's, I think, going to be the most interesting thing. If I'm saying who are the guys who are safe for sure, I'd say Sebastian Joseph-Day, Austin Johnson, Morgan Fox, Scott Matlock, probably Tito Abonia, but he's hurt, so it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think if he's healthy, he makes the roster, and that's fine. The Chargers kept 6 last year. No, Christian Covington in the mix this year. No Braden Fehoko, which leaves Gerard Clark, Nick Williams, who they went out of their way to bring in free agency, David Moa, Christopher Hinton, the international player, CJ Okoye. A lot of guys battling at the bottom of this, defensive line rotation, and it feels like, hey, you hope that some of these guys can come in and, make their role felt or bring something else to this room because it's a room that they haven't got enough out of.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you're looking at maybe a name to watch, outside of those regular guys, it's probably the undrafted free agent Gerard Clark. I mean, Gerard Clark is a guy that we brought up a little bit earlier in the offseason.
Gigantic.
Yeah, he's huge. Like, he's massive. Like, he's a guy that's absolutely going to eat up space, if nothing less, right? I mean, he's going to be a problem to have to deal with. So, with that, he's a guy that definitely could push for a spot. And, we've talked about it, when we talk about much of these other position groups, there's not a ton of spots on this roster that really are available for somebody to come take. Yeah. This back end of this defensive line, rotation, there probably is a spot available there just because a mixture of uncertainty of health and just not enough adequate play. So if Gerard Clark can come in here and steal a spot, then, maybe the Chargers defensive line rotation will be better for it.
And this is how it feels to me. It feels like the spot is going to start off in the hands of Nick Williams just because they went out of their way. He's a guy who started in this league, a veteran presence, right? Why do you bring him in? Kind of like they brought in Christian Covington and guys like that in the past, right?
Right.
If you weren't going to try to have him on the team, obviously, right? You want competition, and even the training camp. I mean, there's a reason why Christopher Hinton got snaps last year, and Braden Fehoko, and David Moa. This was the most beat-up position on the Chargers roster, arguably, with that and the receivers. The biggest injuries happened, Austin Johnson and Tito, both major injuries.
Yeah.
I think they'll probably keep 6. So I think, one of these guys gets it. And I think that Nick Williams is an insurance policy. If no one can come and take this job, we have Nick Williams. We have a vet we can feel good about. Can one of those guys go take it? I'm really excited to watch it. And we'll be talking about it later on this week as we see things begin. On Wednesday, the Chargers first open to the public training camp practice. And I'm very excited to be there. Hopefully I'll see all you guys. But to make sure you don't miss out on the storyline show tomorrow, getting into Kellen Moore and seeing Justin Herbert healthy and so much more. The kicker battle, Dicker going for the kicker battle, right? Make sure you're following or subscribing to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and also listening wherever you get your podcast from and following or subscribing there. Everything helps, and we appreciate you guys doing it on multiple platforms so you can have us in every situation that comes across you. So you can also find the show every day on all of our social media. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Drugmeyer on Twitter at DroTalkSD as well, or X. what was Twitter, formerly known as Twitter. You can find the show's page at Locked On LAC as well. Thank you guys so much for checking out today's show. We're very excited about these training camp battles that we'll start to see play out here pretty soon, and to be back with you guys tomorrow with the biggest storylines. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.